Hi, I'm Ken Stafford. This is a video on how I expand double brackets. This is how I teach it. Before you start expanding double brackets, you need to be able to expand single brackets, which would be a question like this. So how do we expand 4 brackets x plus 3? Well, what we do is we times everything in the bracket by what's on the outside. So 4 times x is 4x, and then we do 4 times 3, which is 12. Because there was a plus symbol here, that's what stays there. It's always going to have the same symbol stay in the middle unless we're timesing by a negative number. Most of the time you'll be timesing by a positive, so that symbol is just going to remain. Now, before we get into double brackets, let's just have a little talk about where single brackets might come from. So, for instance, we could have a rectangle where this side was 5 and this side is x plus 2. So an unknown length, an unknown number, x, with 2 added on. Now to find the area of this rectangle, we would times the length by the width. So we would do 5 times x plus 2, and we put the x plus 2 in brackets because all of it gets times by 5. So that's where the brackets are coming from, potentially. And we would do 5 times x, which is 5x, 5 times 2, which is 10, and again, there's a plus there. We times by positive 5, so it remains positive 10. So that's how you expand single brackets. So don't be starting to expand double brackets before you're confident with that. So double bracket would be something like this. X plus 3 times x plus 4. Now, there's a few ways of setting this out, a few ways of doing it. What I'd like to be clear about before we start is you can get to the point where you just look at these and you say, I can look at that and say the answer is this. And that's what you're aiming for, really, because when you can do that, it's quicker, but also it will help you to factorize, which is when we start putting these back into brackets. So I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I just want to take you through how I'd normally teach it, and I'm always trying to encourage people to spot the quick way of doing it, but without being told. I think if you're told how to do it, it's not as effective. So there's a few ways of doing this. We end up with 4 lines here. We've got to do 4 multiplications. So x times x is x squared. We've got x times 4, which is 4x, and 3 times x, which is 3x. So one way of doing this, I kind of like to do it like this, is to use colors. The colors are really important. But I've kept the 4x and the 3x in green because they are like terms. And at the end, we need to combine them. So the x squared is x squared, but 4x plus 3x is 7x. And then we put the 12 on the end. So that's one way of doing it. You can do it in a grid. I'll show the grid for the next one. So let's do another one. And again, let's talk about where this could have come from. If we had a rectangle where this side was x plus 5, and this side was x plus 3, we would need to times the length by the width to get the area. So we would do x plus 5 times x plus 3. Okay, so that's where it could come from. So the grid method for doing this involves drawing a grid like this and putting, say, x plus 5 here and the x plus 3 here. And we do x times x is x squared, x times 5 is 5x, 3x, and 5 times 3 is 15. And again, I've used the colors here to show that some people call this the peanut. These are like terms. 3 plus 5 is 8x. And we put our 15 in here. So again, you can use the grid to do this. Some people like the grid, some people don't. There are various ways if you're going to draw the lines. Over the years of teaching people, I've had people say their teacher does it like this. Is it like that? Yeah. And it's a smiley face. It's like eyebrows, a nose, and a smiley face. I don't do it like that. I'm going to stick with what I've heard called the wave. So x times x, x squared. Now this one's different because we got a minus 2. So x times minus 2, minus 2x. 8 times x is positive 8x. And last of all, we've got to do 8 times minus 2. I always ignore the positive and negative and just think 8 times 2 is 16. And then I go back and say, right, positive times negative. The rule for that, if one of them's negative, when you multiply, you get a negative. If they're both negative when you're multiplying, it becomes positive again. And we'll do one of those next. Oh, I should combine that before I move on. So you have to, the marks will be there once you've combined it. So don't leave it how I did it. So that's the full solution. That's that quadratic. It's called a quadratic because it's got an x squared. Quadra meaning square here. So any expression or equation which has got an x squared is quadratic. If it's got an x cubed, it's cubic. So that overrules the x squared. So knowing what that means, knowing that quadratic means an x squared will be really useful for you. It helps a lot just knowing why it's that. Let's do one then when they're both negative. X times minus x minus 10 times x minus 4. So hopefully you may be starting to think, I can spot what the answer is going to be at the end. The minus 10 times x gives us minus 10x. And here we've got 10 times 4, 40. And then negative times negative gives us a positive. So watch out for that. So when we collect up the like terms, minus 4 take away 10 is minus 14x. So that's that expanded. Where did the minus 14 come from? Well, it had something to do with the minus 10 and the minus 4, as did the plus 40. That had something to do with the minus 10 and the minus 4. So again, if you can spot the quick way of just skipping this middle bit and getting straight to here, it'll help you. Okay. If you'd like a worksheet of these questions, they're available in the description. Hope that helps.